Right, we're joined now, as promised, live from Austria by Matthew Maynard, former Glamorgan Director of Cricket, former Glamorgan Captain, former Glamorgan Coach. He's done everything at Glamorgan, but we primarily want to talk to him about the loss of his longtime teammate, Hugh Morris, who passed away this week. A very, very special man. He was at the helm of Glamorgan for some of the most successful years of the club's history. Matt, and terribly sad. A couple of years he was battling with bowel cancer. I mean, his career as an administrator, as ECB's chief executive, in some ways, some people would say, even surpassed his stellar playing career. A sad loss.
Very sad loss. Hugh was a great man. He was a wonderful teammate, a courageous opening batsman for many years, a great leader. He started the most successful period in our history when he came to captaincy in '93 for the second time. First time he took on the captaincy, he was a very young man, but obviously highly thought of in a leadership capability. But I think it was a bit too much for the young Hugh. And then when he took over in '93, he had a lot more planning about him, a lot more awareness of where the game and how he wanted the team to play, and put plans in place that we hadn't really had as clear, defined plans as what Hugh put in place for us leading into that '93 season. And one could argue that it was our greatest ever season. We won our first ever domestic one-day trophy. We came third in the championship, and we lost a semi-final of the NatWest down at Hove in a very close match. Alan Wells scored an incredible 100. But Hugh had put all that in place, really, and I think his planning, attention to detail was second to none.
Yeah, Matty, you said there about his planning, and Maynard's mentioned at the top about being a chief executive. So he was a natural born leader, but he was a phenomenal player as well.
He was. You couldn't wish for a better opening. I was a middle order batsman, so I know the bowlers would have to work really hard to get Hugh's wicket, and he had a number of partners before a longer period with Steve James at the top of the order at Glamorgan. But Alan Butcher was another, quality player that he opened with at the club. But him and Steve James really formed a formidable opening partnership for us, and it made batting in the middle order so much easier because you're always off to a good start, a steady start. And the value of players like that can be lost a little bit today. I think someone like Dom Sibley, Hasib Hamid has come back very strongly recently in the last couple of years. He was that type of player for me, someone who didn't give up his wicket cheaply, had the ability to take the opposition apart, which we saw in some one-day games that we played. I remember one down in Kent. We had to knock off 240 in about 32 overs to qualify top of the group. And Hugh went out and scored 130 odd. I mean, it was an unbelievable knock. Smacked him to all parts of the game. But he very rarely played that inhibition, with that inhibition. He always played within himself. What a wonderful player and a wonderful, opening batsman. Did his job fantastically well.
It's the 20,000 runs at over 40 is one thing, and a number of never to be forgotten innings that he played. But my abiding memory, every time I had anything to do with him as a journalist, when he was a player, as a chief executive, was his overwhelming decency. He was just always, fair and reasonable, and I mean a gentleman in every sense. And sometimes, people put on a bit of a show of decency, but he just oozed that quality.
Yeah, and he made you feel the most important person in the room when he was talking to you. He just had that class about him, really, and it's a unique talent, I think, to be able to do that. And not ever, and as you say, Neil, that people try and fake it, and don't get away with it. Well, Hughes was genuine, and you could tell it was genuine. And I think that is why he was so highly thought of. Not just from the playing perspective of the game, but from the administrative part of the game, from the broadcasters, across the game, to the supporters, to the committees that he sat on. Everyone thought the world of Hugh, and quite rightly so.
And Matty, I've seen a video. I've seen a wonderful video. I can't remember who did the video. It might be the BBC that did the video of. I think there was when you won. I think the one-day competition when Tony Cotty hit the winning runs and him and Viv are running off and Hugh lifting the trophy. So all the way through to when we won the Ashes in 2009. Hugh on the balcony with Andy Flower, and that was my last Test match. Hugh was involved in the leadership of not only the playing side, but when you're talking about the administration side, England were the best team in the world when Hugh Morris was chief executive, and Sir Andrew Strauss in charge, Andy Flower, deep thinking men. That's got to be, that's a special achievement as well, because like you say, he was very, very good at making people feel comfortable in his company when he was the ultimate leader.
Yeah, but he never kind of looked for that limelight.
Mm-hmm.
He was happy to take a back seat, and when things were done, and if he was brought up to say, for his congratulations, then he would do it. But for more often than not, he liked to be the guy in the background, even though he wasn't. Even though he's front and centre as managing director or setting up the academy at Loughborough. All these kind of things. But he did what he had to do. But if he didn't have to be in the limelight, then he would step back a little bit from it.
I can't let you go, Matt, without asking you about the Ashes. We just dealt with this a little bit earlier in the show. There were no two-day finishes in Test cricket for 55 years up until 2000. There's been 12 since then, and 2 in this series. Now, as a notoriously technically correct fighter yourself in the middle order, does that suggest to you that Test match batting and long form batting isn't quite what it once was?
Oh, look, I think there's a combination here, isn't there? There's the pitches, both the first and fourth Test match. You have to say they weren't great. How the first pitch was marked above average or good, even very good, I think it was marked. Came a bit of a surprise because, I know they're highly quality bowling attacks, but there's a beautiful picture when Hugh played against the West Indies at the Oval in '91. That Patterson, Ambrose, Walsh, and Marshall, and he's got his feet off the ground, avoiding these bounces left, right, and centre. And it was batsmanship, and for the first time in that series, England put on over 100 with him and with Hugh and Graham Goode. You don't see that these days. You don't see that batsmanship adjusting to the conditions you're playing as much. A lot of it is around, and there's a lot of money to be earned in the shorter forms of the game, and there's a lot of coaching in academies about playing the shorter form of the game, hitting the ball out the ground. There's less of manipulating the ball. There's less of, right, I can play this shot on this certain wicket because it can allow me to hit through the line. But it's like I remember Ricky Ponting trying to drive Graham Swan. I think he was at Edgbaston. And the ball was not quite full enough to drive, but he still tried it, and Swanee bowled him through the gate. And that's class bowling, but it's also a mistake in length on that particular wicket from the batsman. And I think that's what England have done, and Australia to a certain extent. They haven't judged the length on the particular surfaces well enough. They haven't shown the pitch enough respect. You have to show the opposition respect, but you also have to show the pitch you're playing on respect. And if it's not a flat one, I think the greatest example of England's batting has been Pakistan, the last tour of Pakistan. The first Test match, absolute flat deck, and they bullied Pakistan. And they played unbelievable cricket. Harry Brook and Ruti put on that score. Brook got a triple. And then they played on the same wicket. It was obviously turning square. And they didn't adapt well enough to play in those then conditions. And whether that's lack of experience against playing a spinning ball, because we don't see it that much in county cricket, or what, I'm not sure. But it's respecting length is the absolute key thing from a batting perspective. And I say, I don't think we've done that quite as well as we could have done.
Matty, just finally from me, and then thanks again for your kind words about Hugh. We're doing this far too often now. In the last 18 months, we lost Graham Thorpe, somebody you played with and I played with and loved a bit. Robin Smith, we talked about fondly. in the last sort of 6 weeks. And now Hugh Morris, another great custodian of the game. What would your abiding memory be with Hugh, having played with him for Glamorgan, played with him for England? And one final message and final mention to somebody who sadly left us far too soon.
I think one of the things with Hugh is just such a great man around the team, and as I said before, just such a real good team man, would help the younger players coming through into the system. I think one of the biggest surprises to us was when he walked away, age 32, in 97 after we won the championship, to move on to the ECB. He'd obviously had enough, but you didn't, enough of playing. And you can never tell that as a player. You sometimes your body tells you when you're finished. And Hughes had obviously told him earlier in that season that he's ready to retire from playing. But throughout the rest of that season, you would never have guessed it. His work ethic in practice, his work ethic to play every game as good as he could, as every innings as well as he could do, and to finish off. I mean, he finished off with a little not out, but he got 140 odd, I think, in that game. A true testimony to the class of the man to leave on such a high and bow out the game from the playing side of things. I think that was the real Hugh. He kept everything, but so professional and dignified in how he did everything.